When Elena Voss locked eyes with Adrian Russo across a rain-soaked Manhattan intersection, she knew three things. The man she'd fled 6 months ago had found her, he'd just realized she was carrying his twins, and her carefully constructed escape was about to shatter. The underworld king who'd once consumed her life with possessive love now stood between her and freedom. But this time, she wasn't just running for herself. This is a story of dangerous love, impossible choices, and two souls bound by secrets that could destroy them both. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain fell in sheets across Fifth Avenue, turning the city into a blur of neon and shadow. Elena Voss pressed herself against the cold glass of a boutique window, her breath fogging the surface as she watched the black SUV idle at the corner. She'd been running for 6 months. 6 months of looking over her shoulder, changing apartments every few weeks, paying for everything in cash. 6 months of freedom that tasted like fear. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, where the evidence of her past grew stronger every day beneath the oversized coat she'd bought at a thrift store in Queens. 4 months along. Twins. The doctor had said it with such clinical detachment, as if she hadn't just dropped a bomb that would reshape Elena's entire existence. The SUV's door opened. Elena's heart stopped. Even through the rain and distance, she recognized the way he moved. That predatory grace that had first drawn her to him 3 years ago at a charity gala she'd been waitressing. Adrian Russo didn't walk. He commanded space. Every step was deliberate. Every gesture carried weight. The city seemed to hold its breath when he emerged, as if the rain itself considered falling more gently around him. Their eyes met across the crosswalk. Time fractured. Elena saw the exact moment recognition hit him, the way his expression shifted from cold indifference to sharp focus, the subtle tensing of his shoulders, the slight pause in his stride. But it was what came next that made her blood run cold. His gaze dropped, just for a fraction of a second, to her midsection. The coat was bulky, shapeless, designed to hide what she desperately needed to keep secret. But Adrian Russo hadn't built an empire by missing details. His eyes snapped back to hers, and even across the distance, she could read the calculation in them. The math was simple, brutal, and undeniable. 6 months since she'd disappeared from their penthouse without a word, leaving behind only her wedding ring and a note that said, "I can't breathe anymore." 4 months pregnant. The timeline told him everything. Elena ran. She pushed off from the window, her boots splashing through puddles as she turned down a side street. Behind her, she heard the SUV's engine roar to life, heard doors slamming, heard the organized chaos of Adrian's security team mobilizing. He'd found her before, twice in the first month, but she'd gotten better at disappearing. This time, she'd been careful. This time, she'd covered her tracks. This time, she was carrying cargo that made escape exponentially more complicated. The narrow street opened onto a construction site, scaffolding creating a maze of shadows and temporary barriers. Elena ducked under yellow caution tape, her heart hammering against her ribs. She couldn't run like she used to. The pregnancy had already changed her body, made her slower, more vulnerable. But fear was a powerful motivator. She made it 3 blocks before the black sedan cut her off. It appeared as if materialized from the rain itself, sliding to a stop at the intersection ahead. 2 more pulled up behind her. Professional, coordinated, inevitable. This was what happened when you ran from a man who controlled half of New York's underground network. This was what happened when you thought you could simply walk away from Adrian Russo. Elena stopped in the middle of the street, rain streaming down her face, her lungs burning. She was trapped, and they both knew it. The rear door of the center sedan opened. Adrian stepped out, and this time there was nowhere to hide, no distance to soften the impact of seeing him again. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than 6 months of her current rent. His dark hair slicked back by the rain, his face a study in controlled fury. He'd always been beautiful in a dangerous way, sharp cheekbones, intense gray eyes, a mouth that could kiss with devastating tenderness, or deliver words that cut like blades. He walked toward her slowly, deliberately, giving her nowhere to run and all the time in the world to understand how thoroughly caught she was. "Hello, Elena." His voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth, cultured, with an undercurrent of steel. The sound of it after 6 months of silence made her chest tighten, with a complicated mixture of longing and terror. Adrian. She forced herself to meet his gaze, to not show weakness. She'd learned that from him during their marriage. Never show weakness, not even when you're bleeding internally. Let me go. Let you go. He repeated the words as if testing them for absurdity. You disappeared in the middle of the night 6 months ago. You've been living in squalor, working as a cashier at a bodega in Sunset Park, eating 1 meal a day. He took another step closer. And you're pregnant with my children. The plural made her flinch. He'd already figured it out. Twins. Of course he had. Adrian probably knew her current address, her work schedule. Maybe even what she'd eaten for breakfast. The realization should have terrified her more than it did, but she was too exhausted for additional fear. They're not yours, she tried, knowing even as she said it how pathetic the lie sounded. His laugh was sharp, humorless. Don't insult both of us. The math is simple, and we both know I was the only man in your bed. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see the rain beating on his expensive suit, could smell his cologne mixing with the scent of wet asphalt. The question is why you're living like a fugitive instead of in the home I provided. Home? The word erupted from her like a bullet. You mean the cage? The penthouse where I couldn't leave without security escorts? Where you tracked my every movement, controlled who I could see, what I could do? I protected you. His voice dropped, dangerous now. I gave you everything. Everything except freedom. Elena felt tears mixing with the rain on her face. I couldn't breathe, Adrian. Every day felt like drowning. I had to choose between losing myself completely or running, so I ran. And almost killed yourself in the process. He gestured sharply at her, at the dark circles under her eyes, the weight she'd lost everywhere except her growing belly, the cheap coat that was soaked through and probably providing zero warmth. Look at you. You're malnourished, exhausted, living in an apartment that probably has rats. Is this freedom? Is this what you chose? She wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat because he was right. The past 6 months had been brutal. Working double shifts at the bodega, living in a studio apartment in a building where the landlord didn't ask questions as long as the rent was paid in cash, eating ramen and cheap bread to save every dollar for when the babies came. Freedom had tasted like poverty and fear, but it had been her choice. It's my life to ruin, she said quietly. Not anymore. Adrian's hand moved and she tensed, but he was only reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a phone, pressed a button. Marcus, bring the car around. We're going home. No. Elena stepped backward, nearly slipping on the wet pavement. I'm not going back there. I'm not going back to being your possession. You're carrying my children. Each word was measured, absolute. Twins, if my sources are correct. You think I'm going to let you live in squalor while my heirs grow inside you? You think I'm going to stand by while you risk their lives and yours? They're not heirs, they're babies, human beings, not chess pieces in your empire. They're both. Adrian's control cracked, just for a moment, letting her see the fury beneath. They're my children, which makes them targets. Every enemy I've ever made will see them as leverage. Every rival will view them as weakness to exploit. And you... He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to hold her in place. You're wandering around this city like you have no idea how many people would love to hurt me by destroying you. Elena looked up at him, water streaming between them, and saw something she hadn't expected in his eyes. Not just anger, fear. Adrian Russo was afraid. I can protect myself, she whispered, but even she didn't believe it. No, he said simply. You can't, but I can. The car pulled up beside them, a different one, larger, with windows tinted so dark they looked solid. The door opened from the inside, revealing cream leather seats and climate control that seemed to exist in a different universe from the freezing rain. Please. The word sounded foreign in Adrian's mouth, like he was speaking a language he'd nearly forgotten. Get in the car. Let me keep you safe. If not for me, then for them. His hand moved to her stomach, resting there with a gentleness that contradicted everything about this moment. Through the layers of wet fabric, she felt the warmth of his palm. The babies, their babies, were still too small for her to feel them move, but she imagined them there, suspended in the fluid darkness of her womb, unaware that their existence had just detonated what remained of her carefully planned escape. Elena thought about the apartment waiting for her in Sunset Park. The broken heater, the sirens that wailed through the night, the constant fear that colored every moment. She thought about giving birth in a public hospital, alone, trying to care for two newborns while working minimum wage. She thought about all the ways she could fail at this before she even began. Then she thought about the cage, the beautiful, suffocating cage of Adrian's world. "If I get in that car," she said slowly, "I need promises. Name them. No more tracking my every move. No more security escorts to the bathroom. I need space to breathe, Adrian. I need to remember what it feels like to be a person, not a possession." Something shifted in his expression, calculation mixed with something that might have been understanding. "I can't promise complete freedom, not when your safety and our children's safety are at stake. But I can promise compromise. We negotiate. We find a middle ground. I want my own bank account, my own money. Done. I want to be able to leave the penthouse without asking permission. With security." His tone left no room for negotiation on that point. Non-negotiable, but discreet. They stay back. They give you space. Elena studied his face, looking for the trap, the hidden claws that would slam shut around her once she was back in his territory. But all she saw was grim determination and that underlying current of fear. Fear for her, fear for the babies, fear of losing something he'd already lost once. "And if it doesn't work?" she asked. "If I feel like I'm drowning again? Then we talk about it, before you disappear in the middle of the night, before you put yourself through hell to get away from me." His hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. "I'm not the same man I was 6 months ago, Elena. Losing you, it changed things. Made me look at what I'd built and realize some of it was a prison. For you or for me? Both." The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning. Adrian Russo wasn't a man who admitted weakness, who acknowledged fault, but here he stood in the rain, offering something that looked dangerously close to vulnerability. Elena took a shaky breath. She was so tired. Tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of pretending she could do this alone. The babies deserved better than her pride. They deserved safety, resources, a fighting chance at life, even if it meant walking back into the lion's den. "Okay," she whispered. "But if this goes wrong, it won't." Adrian's hand slid from her stomach to her lower back, guiding her toward the car. "I won't let it." She let him help her into the sedan, the heated interior a shock after the freezing rain. He slid in beside her, pulling the door shut, and suddenly they were cocooned in warmth and silence. Through the tinted windows, she could see a security team forming up around the vehicle. 6 men, all armed, all watching the street with predatory awareness. This was Adrian's world. Power, control, the kind of influence that bent reality around it. And she'd just chosen to walk back into it. The car began to move, smooth and silent. Elena stared out the window, watching Sunset Park disappear behind them as they headed toward Manhattan, toward the gleaming towers that housed Adrian's empire. Beside her, Adrian was already on his phone, issuing crisp orders in a voice that expected immediate obedience. "I want Dr. Shen on standby. Full prenatal workup tonight. Marcus, clear the penthouse. I want everyone except essential security out. And contact Harrison. Tell him I need a new security protocol implemented immediately." He was building a fortress around her before they'd even arrived. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her choice settle over her shoulders. She'd traded freedom for safety, autonomy for protection. The question was whether she'd made the right call or just traded one form of captivity for another. The car climbed into the city, rain streaming down the windows, carrying them toward whatever came next. The penthouse was exactly as she remembered, a testament to wealth and taste, all floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, and art that probably cost more than most people's houses. But it was the view that had always captivated her. Manhattan spread out like a glittering kingdom, the city that never slept now veiled in rain and fog. Adrian's kingdom. She stood in the entryway, dripping water onto marble floors that probably cost more per square foot than her monthly rent, feeling like an intruder in a place that had once been her prison. The penthouse felt different now, larger, emptier, like it had been waiting for her to return. Elena! She turned to find Adrian watching her from the hallway, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He'd always looked most dangerous like this, slightly undone, the civilized veneer thin enough to see the predator beneath. Dr. Shen is setting up in the guest suite. She'll do a full examination, make sure you and the babies are healthy. He moved toward her, each step measured. When was the last time you saw a doctor? 3 weeks ago, free clinic in Brooklyn. His jaw tightened. 3 weeks. Were they even qualified to handle a twin pregnancy? They did their best with what they had. Their best isn't good enough, not for my children. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Not for you. There it was again, that possessive edge that had defined their marriage. The certainty that he knew what was best, that his resources and power could solve everything. It was part of what had made her fall for him initially, that absolute confidence, and part of what had driven her away. I need to get out of these wet clothes, she said, needing distance, needing air. Your closet is untouched. Everything's where you left it. Of course it was. Adrian didn't dispose of things he considered his. He kept them, waiting for the moment he could reclaim them. Elena walked down the familiar hallway, her wet boots squelching on hardwood floors. The master bedroom was massive, a California king bed, sitting area, balcony overlooking the city. Her closet was a room unto itself, still filled with the designer clothes Adrian had bought her. She'd left with nothing but what she could fit in a backpack, abandoning thousands of dollars in wardrobe. Looking at it now felt surreal, like stepping into a museum of her past life. She stripped off the wet clothes, letting them fall in a sodden heap. Underneath, her body had changed in ways both subtle and obvious. Her breasts were fuller, tender, her belly rounded in a way that couldn't be hidden much longer. And there, she pressed a hand to her abdomen. Somewhere inside were 2 tiny humans, growing larger every day. Adrian's children. The thought sent a complicated shiver through her. She'd loved him once. Loved him with the kind of intensity that burned everything else away. But love wasn't enough when it came with chains. Love wasn't enough when it suffocated. She pulled on dry clothes, soft leggings, and an oversized sweater that accommodated her changing body. When she emerged, Adrian was waiting in the bedroom, and the expression on his face when he saw her made her breath catch. Hunger. Pure, undisguised hunger. Don't, she said sharply. Don't what? Look at me like that, like you own me. I don't own you. He moved closer, his voice dropping. But I'd be lying if I said seeing you here, carrying my children, doesn't affect me. We were married for 2 years, Elena. I know every inch of you. The idea that you've been going through this alone, that I haven't been there. You weren't there because I chose to leave. That hasn't changed. Hasn't it? He gestured at the room around them. You're here now. For the babies, not for you. The words landed like a physical blow. She saw him absorb them, saw the flash of pain before his expression shuddered. Understood, he said coolly. Dr. Shen is ready for you. The examination was thorough and professional. Dr. Shen, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense manner, performed an ultrasound while Adrian watched from the corner of the room. Elena tried not to look at him, tried not to see the way his entire body tensed when the babies appeared on the screen, 2 small forms curled together in the darkness of her womb. Both heartbeats are strong, Dr. Shen announced. Measurements are good, but... She turned to Elena with concern. You're underweight for a twin pregnancy. Have you been eating properly? I've been eating what I can afford. Well, that changes now. Dr. Shen glanced at Adrian. She needs proper nutrition, protein, calcium, iron. I'll send over a meal plan. Whatever she needs, Adrian said immediately. I can order my own food, Elena interjected. Can you? Dr. Shen raised an eyebrow. Because your blood work suggests otherwise. You're borderline anemic and your vitamin D is dangerously low. This isn't about pride, Ms. Voss. This is about the health of your babies. Elena subsided, hating that the doctor was right, hating that Adrian was standing there with that look on his face that said, I told you so without saying a word. After Dr. Shen left, armed with a list of prescriptions and follow-up appointments, Elena found herself alone with Adrian again. The penthouse felt too large and too small simultaneously. endless space that somehow couldn't contain the tension between them. You should eat something, Adrian said. Chef prepared dinner. You still have Marcel? You think I'd fire the chef you loved? I kept everyone you liked, just in case. Just in case she came back. The words hung unspoken between them. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a space Elena had always found ridiculous for two people. The table could seat 12, and she and Adrian sat at opposite ends like strangers negotiating a treaty, which she supposed they were. Marcel had outdone himself: grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, fresh bread. The kind of meal that reminded Elena exactly how much she'd been living on scraps. She tried to eat slowly to maintain dignity, but her body betrayed her. She was starving. Adrian watched her from across the table, barely touching his own food. "What?" she finally demanded. "Nothing, just, it's good to see you eat. Stop acting like you care." "I do care. I've always cared. That was never the problem. The problem was that you cared too much, or maybe not enough about the right things." Elena set down her fork. "You cared about keeping me safe, keeping me close, but you never cared about what I needed. I gave you everything you could want, except choice, except freedom, except a voice in my own life." She leaned forward. "Do you know what it feels like to wake up every day and realize you're living someone else's version of your life? That every decision has already been made for you?" Adrian's hand tightened on his wine glass. "I was protecting you." "From what? The world? Life? Myself? From the people who would hurt you to get to me. From the dangers you couldn't see. From—" He stopped, jaw working. "You have no idea what I've done to keep you safe. What I've had to do." "Then tell me." "No." The single word was final, absolute. This was the wall she'd always hit with Adrian, the refusal to let her into the darker parts of his world. He'd protect her from it, shield her from it, but never trust her enough to share it. "There it is," Elena said quietly. "The real problem. You don't trust me. I trust you with everything except yourself." Adrian stood, circling the table toward her. "You're reckless, Elena. You take risks without understanding consequences. You think the best of people even when they've shown you who they are. That's beautiful, but it's also dangerous. So you locked me up to keep me safe. I gave you a fortress to live in. A fortress is still a prison." She stood too, refusing to let him loom over her. "And I won't go back to that. I can't, not even for the babies." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, a crack in the armor. "What if I told you I understand that now? That these 6 months without you taught me things about myself I didn't want to know?" "Like what?" "Like the fact that I'd rather have you here, fighting with me, hating me even, than be without you." He reached for her hand and she let him take it, let him pull her closer. "I've been going insane, Elena. Tracking you. Making sure you were safe from a distance. Watching you struggle and not being able to help because I knew if I approached, you'd run again. You're helping me now because I'm pregnant. I'm helping you now because I can't stand to see you hurt. The pregnancy just gave me an excuse you couldn't refuse." His other hand came up to cup her face. "I love you. That never changed." Elena closed her eyes against the onslaught of feeling his words provoked. She'd loved him too. Part of her probably still did, but love wasn't enough. It had never been enough. "Love isn't supposed to feel like suffocation," she whispered. "Then we'll make it different. We'll find a way." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "Stay. Not because you have to, but because you choose to. I'm only here until you feel trapped again. I know, but maybe if we both try, that won't happen." She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that people could change, that circumstances could shift, that they could find a middle ground between his need for control and her need for freedom. But belief required trust, and trust was something she'd lost 6 months ago when she'd realized she couldn't breathe in his world. Before she could respond, Adrian's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, and Elena watched his expression shift from intensity to cold fury in the span of a heartbeat. "What is it?" "Someone leaked to the press that you're back, that you're pregnant." He showed her the phone, a gossip site with a blurry photo of them getting into the car earlier. The headline screamed, "Mafia Princess Returns, Russo heir on the way." Elena felt the ground shift beneath her. "No, No, no, no. This can't. It's already going viral. Adrian was scrolling rapidly, his jaw tight. Every outlet is picking it up. By morning, it'll be everywhere. What does that mean? He looked up at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. Fear. Real, visceral fear. It means every enemy I've ever made now knows exactly where to hit me. It means you and our children just became the most valuable targets in the city. He pulled her close, one arm wrapping around her protectively. And it means the real fight is about to begin. Outside, thunder rumbled across Manhattan like a warning. The storm that had brought them together was only the beginning. What came next would test everything, their fragile peace, their impossible love, and whether they could protect the family they'd created from forces neither of them could fully control. Elena pressed her face against Adrian's chest, feeling his heart pound against her cheek, and wondered if she'd just walked into safety or straight into the eye of a hurricane. The answer, she suspected, was both. The news spread like wildfire through gasoline-soaked streets. By dawn, Elena's face was everywhere. Grainy surveillance photos splashed across tabloids, her pregnant silhouette analyzed by entertainment reporters who treated her womb like breaking news. The headlines grew increasingly sensational with each passing hour. Russo's secret baby. Mama surfaces. Twin heirs to underground empire. Love child scandal rocks New York elite. Elena stood at the penthouse windows, coffee untouched in her hands, watching the city wake up to the story of her life becoming public consumption. Below, on the street 50 floors down, she could see news vans gathering like vultures, photographers with telephoto lenses, reporters doing stand-ups in front of Adrian's building. Her privacy, already threadbare after 6 months of careful hiding, had been completely obliterated in less than 12 hours. Stop looking at them. Adrian's voice came from behind her, rough with exhaustion. He hadn't slept. She'd heard him on the phone all night, his voice sharp and commanding as he tried to contain damage that was already catastrophic. They're going to camp out there, aren't they? Elena asked without turning around. Until they get bored, or until something more interesting happens. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Marcus is arranging a statement, something to satisfy them without giving them ammunition. What kind of statement? Yes, I impregnated my estranged wife, and she fled in terror? Something more along the lines of reconciliation and privacy during this time. Adrian's hand came to rest on the small of her back. The narrative matters, Elena. What story they tell shapes what happens next. She finally turned to look at him. He was still in yesterday's clothes, his shirt wrinkled, tie discarded somewhere. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his jaw was tight with stress. But beneath the exhaustion, she saw the same predatory focus that had built his empire. A man who thrived in crisis. What happens next is that every dangerous person in your world knows I exist, she said. Knows about the babies. You said it yourself last night. I'm a target now. You were always a target. That's why I kept you close. His hand tightened on her back. But yes, this accelerates things. Makes them more complicated. Complicated how? Adrian hesitated, and Elena recognized that pause. The internal calculation of how much truth to share versus how much to withhold for her protection. It was a dance they'd done throughout their marriage, and one of the many reasons she'd left. Don't, she said sharply. Don't decide for me what I can handle. If I'm in danger, I deserve to know the details. You want details? His eyes hardened. Fine. I have 3 active rivals who would love nothing more than to hurt me through you. Victor Constantine runs the Russian operations in Brighton Beach. He's been trying to move into my territory for 2 years. Then there's the Chen family out of Chinatown, who I had a disagreement with last year over port access. And Marcus DeLuca, who thinks because we share a last name that he's entitled to a piece of my business. DeLuca. You're related? Distant cousin. Emphasis on distant. Adrian's jaw worked. He's ambitious, sloppy, and vindictive. Worst combination. Any of them would see you as leverage, as a way to control me. Elena felt cold despite the warmth of the penthouse. So what do? We make you untouchable. Adrian pulled out his phone, showing her a document. This is a prenuptial agreement revision. It stipulates that if anything happens to me, you and the children inherit everything. Complete control of all assets, all businesses, both legitimate and otherwise. Why would that make me untouchable? Because it makes killing me counterproductive. Right now, if I die, my empire fractures. Different factions fight over the pieces. But if you inherit, if you become the queen of this empire, he smiled without humor, then I'm worth more alive. And you become too valuable to harm, because harming you means losing access to everything I've built. Elena stared at this document, her mind reeling. You want to make me your heir. I want to make you and our children the foundation of a succession plan, so ironclad that touching you becomes suicide for anyone stupid enough to try. Adrian's voice dropped. It's protection, Elena, the kind that actually works. It's also a cage. You're binding me to your empire whether I want it or not. I'm giving you power. There's a difference. Is there? She pushed away from him, needing space. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're just finding new ways to control me, making me dependent on your world, your rules. You're already dependent. Adrian's composure cracked, letting genuine emotion bleed through. The moment you conceived my children, you became part of this, whether you wanted it or not. The only question is whether you face it with resources and protection or with nothing but stubborn pride. The words stung because they were true. Elena pressed a hand to her stomach, feeling the subtle curve there. The babies didn't care about her principles or her need for autonomy. They needed safety, food, a world where they could grow up without constantly looking over their shoulders. Hate this, she whispered. I know. Adrian's voice softened, but hate it from a position of strength. Sign the papers. Take the power. If you decide you don't want any of this when the babies are born, when things are stable, we'll renegotiate. But right now, survival comes first. Elena looked at the document again. Pages and pages of legal language that essentially made her one of the most powerful people in New York's criminal underworld, a position she'd never wanted, a title that came with blood on its hands. But it also came with the ability to protect her children. Where do I sign? Adrian's relief was palpable. He handed her a pen, guiding her to the relevant pages. As she signed her name, Elena Voss Russo, the surname she'd abandoned 6 months ago now legally binding her again, she felt the weight of the decision settle over her shoulders like a mantle made of iron. Marcus will file these within the hour, Adrian said, taking the papers. By noon, every person who matters will know you're not just my estranged wife. You're my designated successor. And that makes me safe? It makes you dangerous, which is the same thing in this world. Before Elena could respond, the penthouse door opened. A woman entered, late 20s, stunning in the way that came from expensive maintenance rather than natural beauty, wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than Elena's entire wardrobe from her Sunset Park days. She moved with the confident grace of someone who belonged in Adrian's world. Elena felt something ugly twist in her chest, jealousy, possessiveness, emotions she had no right to feel for a man she'd left. Isabella, Adrian said, his voice cool and professional. I thought I told Marcus to clear the penthouse. You did. But since I'm your lawyer, not staff, I took liberties. Isabella's sharp eyes moved to Elena, assessing. So this is the runaway wife. I expected someone more impressive. Isabella handles my legal affairs, Adrian said before Elena could respond. She's here to explain the implications of what you just signed. How thoughtful. Elena's voice was saccharine. Does she handle all your affairs, or just the legal ones? Isabella's smile was razor sharp. Just legal. Though I can see why you might be confused, Adrian has excellent taste in everything he acquires. I'm not something he acquired. No? Then what are those papers you just signed? Because from where I'm standing, you just became a very valuable asset. Adrian stepped between them, his voice cutting. Isabella, explain the legal protections and nothing else. Elena, she's here to help whether you like her or not. The two women stared at each other across the space Adrian had created, and Elena recognized the dynamic immediately. Isabella was in love with Adrian. Maybe had been for years. And Elena's return, pregnant with his children, had just destroyed whatever hopes she'd been harboring. The papers create a trust, Isabella began, her professional mask sliding into place. All of Adrian's assets, both declared and undeclared, are now held in a structure that names you and your children as primary beneficiaries. If anything happens to Adrian, control transfers to you immediately. No probate, no legal challenges, no disputes. What about his family? Elena asked. Don't they have claims? Adrian has no living family with legal standing. His parents died when he was 19. No siblings. Some distant cousins who'll scream when they find out. But they have no legitimate claim. Isabella pulled out a tablet, showing Elena financial spreadsheets. You're looking at combined assets worth approximately $2 billion. Real estate, investments, businesses both legitimate and otherwise. As of this morning, you control it all if Adrian dies. $2 billion. The number was so large it became meaningless. Elena had been living on minimum wage 6 months ago, counting pennies to afford dinner. Now she was looking at wealth that could reshape lives with a signature. And if I don't want it? Elena asked. Too bad. Isabella's voice held a note of satisfaction. You already signed. The only way out now is Adrian's death or a legal proceeding that would take years and expose everything, including things that would land both of you in federal prison. Isabella. Adrian's voice held warning. She wanted to know the implications. I'm telling her. Isabella turned to Elena. You're in this now. Congratulations. You're a crime boss's queen whether you wanted the crown or not. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but exhaustion was catching up with her. She'd slept poorly, her body still adjusting to being back in Adrian's world. The babies were draining her energy, making her tired at odd hours. I need to lie down, she said quietly. Elena, Adrian started, but she was already moving toward the bedroom. Just give me an hour. Let me process this. She closed the bedroom door behind her, leaning against it as the weight of the morning crashed over her. Outside that door was Adrian, rebuilding his fortress around her. Isabella, watching her with thinly veiled hostility. And somewhere in the city, enemies she'd never met planning moves against her before she even understood the game. Elena crawled into bed fully clothed, pulling covers over herself despite the room's comfortable temperature. She needed the weight of blankets, needed to feel cocooned and protected, even if it was an illusion. Sleep came surprisingly quickly, dragging her under into dreams that mixed memory and nightmare. She woke to voices arguing in the next room, low and intense, but not quite quiet enough. Irresponsible to involve her this deeply, this fast, Isabella's voice sharp with disapproval. I didn't have a choice. Adrian, defensive. The leak changed everything. She needed protection that words can't provide. So you made her your heir. Adrian, she's been back less than 24 hours. You don't even know if she'll stay. She's carrying my children. She'll stay. Will she? Because from what I saw this morning, she looks ready to bolt the first chance she gets. A pause. And you're not thinking clearly. You never do when it comes to her. That's enough. Is it? Because I've been cleaning up your messes for 5 years, and this woman is the biggest one yet. She left you. She chose poverty and danger over being with you. What makes you think a piece of paper changes that? Elena heard something slam. Adrian's hand on a table, maybe. What I think is that you're overstepping. Your job is to handle legal matters, not question my personal decisions. My job is to protect you from making mistakes that could destroy everything you've built. And she... Isabella's voice dropped, became more intimate. Adrian, I've stood by you through everything. Been there when you needed someone. Don't I deserve more than being sidelined for a woman who ran away? Elena felt her chest tighten, so she'd been right about Isabella's feelings. The question was whether Adrian returned them. You deserve respect and compensation, both of which you receive generously. Adrian's voice was cold now, distant. What you don't deserve is to confuse professional loyalty with personal entitlement. Elena is my wife, the mother of my children. That's not changing. You're a estranged wife who hates everything you are. Estranged or not, she's mine. That's final. The possessive declaration should have angered Elena. Instead, she felt a complicated surge of satisfaction. Adrian was defending her, choosing her, even against someone who clearly wanted to replace her. Then I hope you know what you're doing, Isabella said, her voice brittle. Because when this falls apart, and it will, I won't be the one putting you back together. Noted. Elena heard footsteps, a door closing, then silence. She lay in bed, processing what she'd heard. Isabella was in love with Adrian. Adrian was, what? Still possessive of Elena despite everything? Or just protective of his investment now that she carried his children? The bedroom door opened quietly. Adrian entered, moving carefully like he expected her to still be asleep. When he saw her eyes open, he paused. How much did you hear? Enough? Elena sat up, pushing hair from her face. Is she in love with you? Probably. Adrian said it like it was irrelevant. But I've never given her reason to think those feelings were reciprocated. Because you're still hung up on your runaway wife? Because I don't want her that way. I never have. He moved closer, sitting on the edge of the bed. Isabella is brilliant at her job. She's also ambitious and calculating. Those qualities make her an excellent lawyer. They don't make her someone I want in my personal life. And I am? You're different. Adrian's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. You've never wanted anything from me except to be seen, to be valued as more than an accessory or asset. Even when I failed to give you that, even when I suffocated you with protection, you never tried to use me. You just tried to survive me. The honesty in his voice made Elena's throat tight. I didn't think you understood that. I didn't. Not at first. His thumb traced patterns on her palm. But 6 months of your absence teaches clarity. I had everything: power, money, influence, and I'd trade it all to have you look at me the way you used to, before I ruined it. Adrian, let me finish. He took a breath. I know you're only here because of the babies. I know you don't trust me, but I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I've learned, that I can be what you need instead of just what I think you should want. Elena studied his face, looking for deception and finding only exhausted sincerity. This was a side of Adrian she'd seen only in their earliest days together, before the walls went up, before control became his primary language of love. What does that look like? She asked carefully. You proving you've changed? I don't know yet. We figure it out together. His grip on her hand tightened. But it starts with honesty. No more hiding things to protect you. No more making decisions without your input. We're partners in this, or we're nothing. Partners. The word tasted strange. They'd been many things: lovers, spouses, captor and captive in some twisted dance. But partners implied equality, something they'd never truly achieved. Equal say in decisions that affect both of us, Adrian continued. Transparency about threats, and freedom to leave if you choose it, though I'll fight like hell to make you want to stay. And if I still feel like I'm drowning, then we surface together, or we drown together. But we don't do it alone anymore. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that people could change, that circumstances could shift the fundamental dynamics between them. But trust was earned, not given. And Adrian would have to prove his words with actions. Okay, she said slowly. We try. But the first time I feel that cage closing around me again, you tell me. You don't run. You give me a chance to fix it before it breaks. Adrian lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. That's all I'm asking. A chance. Before Elena could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression darkened immediately. What? Victor Constantine just made contact. He wants a meeting. Elena's blood ran cold. The Russian from Brighton Beach? One of the people who might target me? Yes. Adrian was already standing, his mind shifting into tactical mode. This is either a peace offering or a trap. Either way, I need to know which. So you're going to meet him? I don't have a choice. Ignoring him looks weak. Weak gets you killed in this business. He was already pulling out his phone, typing rapidly. I'll take Marcus and a full security team. You stay here behind the penthouse security. When? Tonight. Neutral ground. A restaurant in Midtown, he suggested. Adrian's jaw was tight. This is what I meant about transparency. Constantine knows about you now. About the babies. He's making a move because he sees opportunity. What kind of opportunity? That's what I need to find out. Adrian cupped her face, his touch gentle despite the violence in his eyes. Whatever happens, you stay safe. That's non-negotiable. I don't like you walking into a potential trap. I've been walking into potential traps my whole life. I'm good at it. He kissed her forehead, quick and possessive. Trust me to come back. He left her there, already on the phone coordinating security protocols, his voice sharp with authority. Elena sat on the bed, one hand on her stomach where their children grew, and realized with crystal clarity that this was her life now, waiting for dangerous men to make dangerous moves, hoping the father of her children survived each new day. She'd thought freedom meant escape, but maybe freedom was choosing which battles to fight, and she'd just chosen to fight beside Adrian rather than alone. The question was whether they'd both survive what came next. The hours before Adrian's meeting crawled by with agonizing slowness. Elena tried to distract herself, reading pregnancy books, doctor. Shen had left, attempting to eat the lunch Chef Marcel prepared, even flipping through design magazines in a desperate attempt to think about anything other than what could go wrong. Nothing worked. By 7 p.m., when Adrian emerged from his office dressed for war in a black suit and carrying a tension that filled the penthouse, Elena was wound so tight she thought she might shatter. "You don't have to do this," she said, knowing it was pointless even as the words left her mouth. "Yes, I do." Adrian checked his weapon, a sleek handgun that he holstered with practiced ease. "Constantine needs to understand that nothing's changed, that I'm still in control. Even though everything's changed, especially because everything's changed." He moved to her, pulling her close. "This is how we keep you safe, by showing strength, by making it clear that touching you means war." Elena pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his scent, expensive cologne and something uniquely him. "I don't want to be a widow before I figure out if I want to be a wife again." "You won't be." His arms tightened around her. "So I've survived worse than Victor Constantine. I'll survive this. Promise me. Elena, promise me you'll come back." Adrian pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "I promise. No matter what happens tonight, I'm coming back to you." He kissed her then, hard and desperate, pouring 6 months of separation and fear and need into the contact. Elena kissed him back, letting herself feel everything she'd tried to bury, the love, the anger, the terrible, consuming want that had drawn them together in the first place. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "Don't leave while I'm gone," he whispered. "I won't. Even if you get scared, even if this feels like too much, stay. I'll stay." And she meant it, at least for tonight. Adrian left surrounded by 6 armed men, all of them moving with military precision. Elena watched from the window as the motorcade pulled away from the building, disappearing into the neon chaos of the city. Then she was alone. The penthouse felt enormous without Adrian's presence filling it. Elena wandered from room to room, unable to settle, her anxiety building with each passing minute. She should eat, should rest, should do something productive. Instead, she found herself in Adrian's office. The space was pure Adrian, dark wood, leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His desk was a command center, multiple monitors showing various security feeds. Elena could see the building's entrance, the garage, even what looked like feeds from other locations across the city. This was how he'd tracked her, how he'd known she was safe even when she thought she was invisible. The realization should have angered her. Instead, she felt a complicated surge of understanding. This was Adrian's language of love, surveillance, protection, control. He didn't know how to care without monitoring, didn't know how to love without owning. Teaching him a different language would be the work of years, if it was even possible. Elena was about to leave when one of the monitors caught her attention. The feed showed Adrian's motorcade arriving at the restaurant, an upscale Italian place in Midtown. She watched him exit the vehicle, flanked by Marcus and his security team. They entered the building, and the camera angle switched to what must be interior surveillance. She shouldn't watch. It felt like an invasion of privacy, even though Adrian had clearly set up these feeds himself. But fear kept her rooted in place, eyes locked on the screen. The meeting happened in a private room. Elena could see Adrian sitting at a table across from a man she assumed was Victor Constantine, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that had seen violence and dealt it back. 2 other men flanked him, clearly armed. The conversation looked civil at first. Drinks were poured, words exchanged. But Elena could read the tension in Adrian's shoulders, could see the predatory stillness that meant he was calculating threats. Then Constantine pulled out a phone, showed Adrian something. Even through the grainy surveillance footage, Elena saw Adrian's reaction, the way his entire body went rigid, the flash of rage that crossed his face before he controlled it. What had Constantine shown him? The Russian was talking now, gesturing. Adrian responded, his voice clearly sharp even though Elena couldn't hear the words. The temperature in the room changed, civility evaporating into something far more dangerous. Adrian stood. So did Constantine. For a moment, Elena thought violence would erupt right there. Both sides reaching for weapons, the meeting dissolving into bloodshed. Then Adrian did something unexpected. He pulled out his own phone, typed something, and showed it to Constantine. The Russian's expression shifted. Surprise, then calculation, then something that might have been respect. He nodded slowly, gestured for his men to stand down. Whatever Adrian had shown him, it had worked. The meeting concluded with a handshake. Brief, professional, completely devoid of warmth. Then Adrian was leaving, his security team forming up around him as they exited the restaurant. Elena watched the motorcade pull away, relief flooding through her so intensely her knees weakened. He was alive. He'd survived. Now she just had to wait for him to come home. 20 minutes later, she heard the penthouse door open. Elena met Adrian in the entryway, searching his face for damage and finding only exhaustion. "What happened?" she demanded. "He showed me photos." Adrian's voice was flat, controlled. "Of you. From the past 6 months. Every apartment you lived in, every route you walked, times, dates, locations." His hands clenched into fists. "He's been tracking you almost as long as I have." Elena felt ice flood her veins. "Why?" "Insurance, in case he ever needed leverage against me." Adrian's eyes met hers, and she saw fury there. Pure, controlled rage. "He wanted me to know that he could have taken you any time in the past 6 months, that you were only safe because he allowed it." "What did you show him?" "The succession documents. Proof that you're my heir." A grim smile crossed Adrian's face. "I explained that if anything happened to you, the resulting power vacuum in my retaliation would destroy everything he's built. That touching you doesn't give him leverage. It gives him a war he can't win." "And he believed you?" "He's not stupid. He knows I'd burn this city to ashes if someone hurt you." Adrian pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. "But he also knows that as long as you're alive and safe, he has a chance at negotiation, at finding ways to coexist. Your existence as my heir creates more value than your death. That's what keeps you safe." Elena pressed her face against his chest, feeling his heart racing despite his controlled exterior. He'd been more frightened than he'd shown, more worried about what Constantine might do. "I watched you on the security feeds," she admitted, "from your office. I couldn't just sit here not knowing." "Good." Adrian's hand came up to cradle her head. "No more secrets. You want to know what's happening? You ask. You want to see the surveillance. You look. This is your world too now." "I don't want it to be." "I know. But it is. And we deal with reality, not wishes." They stood there in the entryway, holding each other while the city glittered beyond the windows. Elena felt the weight of her new position settling deeper, not just Adrian's wife, but his designated successor. A piece on the board in a game she'd never wanted to play. But she was also the mother of his children, and that meant playing to win. "Teach me," she said quietly. "Teach you what?" "How this works. Your world. The rules. The players." Elena pulled back to look at him. "If I'm going to be your heir, if I'm going to protect our children, I need to understand the game." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, surprise mixed with pride. "You want to learn the business?" "I want to survive it. There's a difference." "Survival is a good start." Adrian led her toward his office. "Then let's begin your education." They spent the next 3 hours in his office while Adrian explained the structure of his empire. The legitimate businesses that provided cover, real estate development, import-export companies, nightclubs, and the shadow operations underneath, protection rackets, controlled gambling, strategic partnerships with other organizations. It was overwhelming and terrifying and grimly fascinating all at once. Elena had known Adrian operated outside the law, but understanding the scope of it was different. He didn't just break rules, he created parallel systems where his rules were the only ones that mattered. "Who else knows about the succession plan?" Elena asked as midnight approached. "Isabella filed it this afternoon. By now, everyone who matters has heard. Adrian pulled up a list on his computer. Constantine knows. The Chen family will know by morning. Marcus DeLuca probably already knows. He has sources in the legal community. And they'll all react? Differently. Constantine saw it as a stabilizing force. One clear successor means less chaos if something happens to me. The Chens will probably appreciate the clarity. But DeLuca, Adrian's jaw tightened. He'll see it as a threat. He thinks he should have been my heir by blood. Having you named instead is a personal insult. So, he's the one we need to worry about? He's the one most likely to do something stupid, yes. Adrian stood, stretching. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Right now you need sleep. Dr. Shen was very clear about rest being essential for twin pregnancies. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to keep learning, but exhaustion was catching up with her. The babies seemed to drain her energy faster each day. She let Adrian guide her back to the bedroom, his hand warm on her lower back. "Will you stay?" she asked as he started to leave. Adrian paused at the doorway. "In the bedroom?" "Just stay, please. I don't want to be alone tonight." She saw the war in his expression, the desire to stay versus the fear of pushing too hard too fast. But then he was moving back into the room, removing his jacket and shoulder holster, towing off his shoes. "Just sleeping," he said. "Just sleeping," Elena agreed. They lay on opposite sides of the massive bed, careful not to touch, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. Elena stared at the ceiling, hyper-aware of Adrian's breathing, of his presence in her space after 6 months of absence. "I'm scared," she whispered into the darkness. "Of what?" "All of it. The danger. The responsibility. Becoming someone I don't recognize." She turned her head to look at him. "What if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough?" Adrian rolled to face her, and even in the dim light she could see the intensity in his eyes. "You survived 6 months alone while pregnant with twins. You survived poverty and fear and uncertainty. You're stronger than you think." That was different. That was just survival. This is survival too, just a different battlefield. His hand moved across the space between them, finding hers. "And this time, you don't fight alone." Elena let their fingers intertwine, let herself take comfort in the contact. Tomorrow would bring new threats, new challenges. But tonight, they had this, fragile peace in the eye of the storm. She fell asleep with Adrian's hand in hers, and for the first time in months, she didn't dream of running. The next morning arrived with deceptive calm, sunlight streaming through the penthouse windows like nothing in the world had changed. But everything had changed. Elena woke to find Adrian already gone, his side of the bed cold, a note on his pillow written in his sharp, precise handwriting. "Meeting with the Chens. Back by noon. Don't leave the building." She crumpled the note in her fist, irritation flaring despite understanding the necessity. This was the compromise they'd struck. Transparency about his movements, but restrictions on hers. Protection that still felt uncomfortably close to control. Elena showered and dressed, choosing clothes from her old wardrobe that still fit her changing body. The designer labels felt strange after months in thrift store finds, like putting on someone else's skin. She was examining herself in the mirror, trying to reconcile the woman looking back at her with the person she'd been just days ago, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her thumb hovered over the decline button, but something made her answer. "Hello?" "Elena Russo." The voice was male, unfamiliar, with a faint accent she couldn't place. Or should I say, Elena Voss? I can never remember which name you prefer. Ice flooded her veins. "Who is this?" "A friend, or I could be if you're smart." A pause. "I'm calling to offer congratulations on your new position, successor to the Russo Empire. That's quite a promotion for a woman who was living in a rat-infested apartment last week." Elena's hand tightened on the phone. "If you have something to say it. Direct. I appreciate that." The man's voice carried amusement. "Here's what I have to say. Your husband made you his heir to protect you, but protection works both ways. And right now, Adrian Russo is making enemies faster than he can count them. Eventually, one of those enemies is going to do the math and realize the quickest way to destroy him is through you." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning. See, I'm invested in your survival. You dying creates chaos I don't want. But other people? They're not so forward-thinking. A sound like traffic in the background. Marcus DeLuca, for instance. He's very upset about being passed over for succession. Upset men do stupid things. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand something important. Adrian can't protect you from everything. His control isn't absolute. And the moment you realize that, the moment you understand how vulnerable you really are, you'll start making smarter choices. Choices like what? Like who you trust, who you listen to, who you let close. The voice dropped, became more intimate. I'll be in touch, Elena. When things get dangerous, and they will, remember that you have options. You're not as trapped as Adrian wants you to believe. The line went dead. Elena stood frozen, her heart hammering. She should tell Adrian immediately. This was exactly the kind of threat he needed to know about. But something held her back, the caller's words echoing in her mind. You're not as trapped as Adrian wants you to believe. Was she trapped? The penthouse suddenly felt smaller, the windows less like views and more like the walls of an expensive cage. She'd agreed to stay, agreed to learn Adrian's world, but had she just traded one form of captivity for another? Before she could spiral further, the penthouse door opened. But it wasn't Adrian who entered. It was Isabella, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. What are you doing here? Elena asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Adrian asked me to review some documents with you, estate planning for the babies. Isabella set the portfolio on the dining table with more force than necessary. Apparently, even though you're the heir, there are additional protections needed for the children specifically. He didn't mention that this morning. He probably didn't want to overwhelm you, given that you're so new to all of this. Isabella's smile was sharp. Must be difficult learning an entire world overnight, especially one you clearly never wanted to be part of. Elena crossed her arms. If you have something to say to me, just say it. Fine. Isabella turned to face her fully. I think you're a liability. You don't understand this world, don't respect it, and your presence is making Adrian vulnerable. He's distracted, making emotional decisions instead of strategic ones, and that's going to get people killed. People like you? People like everyone in his organization who depends on him to be smart. Isabella's voice hardened. I've watched Adrian build this empire from nothing, watched him make impossible choices, sacrifice everything for power and control. And then you show up, pregnant and helpless, and suddenly he's willing to risk it all for someone who can't even commit to staying. The words hit harder than Elena wanted to admit because there was truth in them. She hadn't committed to staying. She was here out of necessity, not choice. And Adrian was making himself vulnerable for her. I didn't ask for any of this, Elena said quietly. No, you just asked to be his wife. You married into this world willingly. You just didn't like what that meant when the reality set in. Isabella pulled documents from her portfolio. These are trust structures for your children. Sign them and I'll get out of your hair. Elena approached the table, scanning the papers. The legal language was dense, but the gist was clear. Separate trusts for each baby, protected assets that couldn't be touched even if something happened to both her and Adrian, provisions for guardianship, education, security. Who becomes guardian if we both die? Elena asked. Marcus Vega, Adrian's head of security. He's the only person Adrian trusts completely. Isabella pointed to a clause. But you can designate a co-guardian if you want, family member, close friend. Anyone you'd want raising your children if the worst happens. Elena thought about her family, parents she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, a sister who'd cut her off when she married Adrian, people who'd made it clear that choosing Adrian meant choosing exile from their lives. She had no one. Marcus is fine, she said, signing where Isabella indicated. Good, because frankly, I can't think of anyone better. Marcus is loyal to Adrian beyond reason. He'd protect those babies with his life. Isabella gathered the papers. Unlike some people, he understands what loyalty means. You think I'm disloyal because I left? I think you're disloyal because you came back only when you needed something. Safety, resources, protection for your children. If you weren't pregnant, you'd still be in that apartment in Sunset Park, pretending you were free while slowly destroying yourself. Isabella's eyes glittered. At least be honest about what this is. You're using Adrian just as much as you claim he used you. The accusation stung because Elena couldn't entirely refute it. Yes, she'd come back because she needed help. Yes, she was accepting Adrian's protection for the baby's sake. But that didn't mean her feelings were purely transactional. Did it? I love him, Elena said, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. I left because I loved him enough to know we were destroying each other, and I came back because I love him enough to try again. Love? Isabella laughed, the sound bitter. You think love matters in this world? Love is a weakness, a vulnerability that gets exploited. Adrian loved you so much he couldn't function without you, and that made him sloppy, made him miss threats he should have seen coming. What threats? Isabella hesitated, and Elena saw the internal debate. How much to reveal versus how much to keep hidden. Tell me, Elena pressed. You said I need to understand this world, so help me understand. There's a situation developing, Isabella said finally. Marcus DeLuca isn't just upset about being passed over for succession. He's actively building a coalition, reaching out to smaller organizations, promising them territory and influence if they help him challenge Adrian's control. Is that why Adrian's meeting with the Chens? To shore up alliances? Partly. But also because DeLuca's been making noise about you specifically, questioning your legitimacy as heir, suggesting that Adrian's judgment is compromised because of his feelings for you. Isabella's voice dropped. He's planning something. We don't know what yet, but it's coming soon. Elena felt cold despite the penthouse's warmth. Does Adrian know? He knows DeLuca's unhappy. He doesn't know how deep the conspiracy goes. Isabella met her eyes. And I can't tell him because half of my intelligence comes from sources who would disappear if they knew I was sharing with anyone. So I'm telling you instead, consider it a professional courtesy. Or a warning, take your pick. Why would you warn me if you think I'm a liability? Because despite my personal feelings, I'm practical. You're Adrian's heir now. That makes your survival important to the Empire's stability. Isabella moved toward the door. Just try not to get yourself killed. It would be inconvenient for all of us. She left before Elena could respond, the penthouse door closing with finality. Elena stood alone in the too large space, her mind racing. 2 warnings in one morning, one from an unknown caller, one from Isabella, both painting a picture of danger closing in from multiple directions. And Adrian was out there, making alliances and managing threats, thinking she was safe behind his fortress walls. But safe was an illusion. She'd learned that much. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. Look outside your building, southeast corner, now. Every instinct screamed not to engage, but curiosity and fear drove her to the windows. She looked down, scanning the street 50 floors below. At first, she saw nothing unusual, typical Manhattan chaos, taxis and pedestrians and delivery trucks. Then she saw him. A man standing on the southeast corner, looking up directly at her window. He was too far away to make out features, but something about his posture, the deliberate way he held his position, made her stomach clench. He raised one hand in a casual wave, then pointed at her. A clear message. I see you. I know exactly where you are. Another text arrived. Wave back if you understand you're not as safe as you think. Elena's hand shook as she stepped away from the window. This was psychological warfare. Someone, probably the caller from earlier, demonstrating that Adrian's protection had holes, that she could be watched, tracked, targeted, despite all the security. She should call Adrian, should tell him everything, the phone call, Isabella's warning, the man on the street. But the moment she did, the walls would close in tighter. More security, more restrictions, more suffocation disguised as safety. Elena made a decision that was probably stupid but felt necessary. She grabbed her phone and purse, pulling on a coat that mostly hid her pregnancy. Then she walked out of the penthouse, ignoring the security guards stationed outside, who immediately stood to attention. Mrs. Russo, are you going somewhere? Just down to the lobby. I need some air. I'll escort you. I don't need an escort to ride the elevator. Elena kept her voice firm. I'm going to the lobby, buying a coffee from the shop downstairs, and coming right back. I'm not leaving the building. The guard looked uncertain, clearly weighing Adrian's general orders against the specific situation. Finally, he nodded. 10 minutes. If you're not back, I call Mr. Russo. Fine. Elena rode the elevator down, her heart pounding. This was reckless, dangerous, exactly the kind of risk-taking behavior that had made Adrian so paranoid about her safety in the first place. But she needed to prove something, to herself, to whoever was watching, that she had agency, that she could make choices, even small ones, without asking permission. The lobby was bustling with residents and visitors. Elena headed for the coffee shop, ordered a decaf latte she didn't want, and tried to look casual while her mind raced with possibilities. Was the man from the corner watching her now? Was this exactly what he wanted, to draw her out, make her prove she could be manipulated? Mrs. Russo. The voice came from behind her, male and unfamiliar. Elena turned to find a man in his 40s, well-dressed in a business suit, with cold eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. I'm sorry, do I know you? No, but I know you. He gestured to an empty table in the corner. 2 minutes of your time. That's all I'm asking. Every alarm in her head was screaming to run, to call for security, to do anything except follow this stranger. But she found herself walking to the table, sitting across from him, driven by a need to understand the game being played around her. Who are you? My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I represent people who have concerns about your husband's recent decisions. The man folded his hands on the table. Making you his heir was controversial. It suggests Adrian's priorities are shifting away from business and toward personal matters. And that bothers you because? Because personal matters make people unpredictable. Adrian Russo's value has always been his ruthless pragmatism, his ability to make hard choices without emotion clouding his judgment. The man's eyes bored into hers. You represent emotion, weakness, a liability that could cost everyone who depends on him. Then those people should take it up with Adrian. They will. But first, I wanted to extend an offer to you directly. He slid a card across the table, plain white, just a phone number embossed in black. When things get dangerous, and they will, you'll need an exit strategy, a way to protect yourself and your children that doesn't depend on Adrian's empire. Call that number. We'll provide resources, protection, and most importantly, freedom. You want me to betray Adrian. I want you to survive. There's a difference. The man stood. Think about it. When his world starts burning, and it's already starting, you'll want options. We're offering you one. He walked away before Elena could respond, disappearing into the lobby crowd like he'd never been there. She stared at the card, her fingers trembling as she picked it up. Just a phone number. But it represented something terrifying and tempting in equal measure, a way out, an escape route if everything collapsed. She should throw it away, should tell Adrian immediately, should do everything a loyal partner would do. Instead, she slipped the card into her pocket and headed back upstairs. The security guard looked relieved when she returned. Coffee's good here, isn't it? Great, Elena lied, carrying her untouched latte back into the penthouse. She threw the coffee away and paced the space, her mind churning. Too many pieces moving at once. Too many players with agendas she couldn't fully see. And at the center of it all, Adrian, trying to protect her while enemies circled closer. The penthouse door opened again, and this time it was Adrian, returning earlier than expected. He took one look at her face and crossed the room immediately. What happened? What makes you think something happened? Elena. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I can read you. Something's wrong. She should tell him, should explain about the phone call, the man on the street corner, the encounter in the lobby, but the words stuck in her throat, tangled with the memory of the card in her pocket, the secret she was already keeping. I'm just tired, she said. Pregnancy hormones. Dr. Shen warned me they'd make everything feel more intense. Adrian studied her, clearly unconvinced, but he let it go. The meeting with the Chens went well. They're committed to neutrality in any conflict with DeLuca. That's as close to support as we'll get from them. And DeLuca? What's he planning? Nothing good, but we're monitoring the situation. Adrian guided her to the couch, sitting beside her. I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to marry me. Again. Legally, publicly, in a way that makes it impossible for anyone to question your legitimacy as my heir. Elena stared at him. We're already married. Our marriage certificate is from 3 years ago, before you left. Some people are arguing that our separation invalidates the succession documents, that you're estranged and shouldn't have legal standing. Adrian's hand found hers. A remarriage, a public ceremony, witnesses from the major organizations. It solidifies your position, makes it undeniable. You want to use our wedding as a political statement. I want to protect you the only way I know how, by making your status so legally ironclad that challenging it becomes impossible. He searched her face. I know it's not romantic. I know it's strategic. But in this world, strategy is how we survive. Elena thought about the card in her pocket, the exit route she hadn't asked for but now possessed. Remarrying Adrian would close that door, would bind her even more tightly to his world, his empire, his fate, but it would also protect their children, would give them the legal foundation they needed to inherit, to be safe, to have futures not defined by their father's enemies. When? She asked quietly. 3 days, Friday evening. I'll invite representatives from every organization that matters. Make it an event they can't ignore. Adrian's thumb traced circles on her palm. I know this isn't what you wanted, but it's what we need. I want one thing in return. Name it. I want to be involved in security decisions, not just informed after the fact, actually involved in planning, in strategy. Elena met his eyes. If I'm going to be your heir, your partner in this, then I need to be treated like one. No more protecting me from information you think I can't handle. Adrian hesitated, and she could see the war in his expression, the instinct to shield her battling against his promise of transparency. Okay, he said finally, starting now, full transparency, equal partnership. Starting now, Elena echoed, even as the card in her pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. She was lying to him, keeping secrets, exactly the kind of behavior that had poisoned their first marriage. But telling him about the encounters would trigger a lockdown she wasn't sure she could survive. And the card was insurance. A backup plan she hoped never to use but couldn't bring herself to destroy. I love you, Adrian said quietly. I know I don't say it enough. I know I show it in twisted ways. But I need you to know everything I do, every decision I make, it's to keep you and our children safe. I know. And she did know. That was the tragedy of it. Adrian loved her in the only way he knew how, with possession and protection and control disguised as devotion. The question was whether she could love him back without losing herself in the process. They spent the rest of the day planning the remarriage ceremony. Adrian made calls, coordinated with Isabella on legal documentation, arranged for a judge who owed him favors. Elena watched him orchestrate their wedding like a military operation, efficient and precise, turning their love into leverage. Night fell over Manhattan, the city lights coming alive like stars in reverse. Elena stood at the windows while Adrian worked in his office, one hand on her stomach where the babies grew. She could feel them now, subtle flutters, that doctor. She said would soon become kicks. Her children. Adrian's children. Heirs to an empire built on violence and control. What kind of mother brought children into this world willingly? Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Another text. Friday's wedding is a trap. DeLuca's planning something during the ceremony. Watch your back. Elena's blood ran cold. She stared at the message, then at Adrian through the office doorway, oblivious to the warning as he coordinated his elaborate chess game. She should tell him. Right now. Immediately. But telling him meant explaining how she'd gotten the message. Meant admitting she'd left the penthouse alone. Met with strangers. Taken a card with an escape route phone number. Meant revealing that she'd been lying, keeping secrets, doing exactly what he feared most, operating independently in a world that could kill her. Elena deleted the message and pocketed her phone. She'd handle this herself, somehow. She'd keep her eyes open during the ceremony, stay alert for threats. And if something happened, if DeLuca made his move, she'd be ready. Or at least, that's what she told herself as she crawled into bed that night. Adrian's arm heavy across her waist, his breathing deep and even with sleep. She lay awake in the darkness, the card still in her coat pocket in the closet, the warning text deleted but seared into her memory. 3 days until the remarriage. 3 days to figure out how to protect Adrian from a threat she couldn't reveal without exposing her own deceptions. 3 days to decide whether she was truly Adrian's partner or just another person keeping dangerous secrets in a world built on lies. Outside, the city hummed with nocturnal energy, cars and sirens, and the endless pulse of millions of lives intersecting. Somewhere out there, Marcus DeLuca was planning something. Somewhere, enemies were circling. Somewhere, the future was rushing toward them like a freight train with failed brakes. And Elena was caught in the middle, pregnant and terrified and determined to survive, even if survival meant becoming someone she'd never intended to be. The babies fluttered again, stronger this time, as if reminding her why none of this was a choice anymore. She was doing this for them. All of it. The lies, the secrets, the dangerous gambles. She'd keep them safe, whatever it cost. Even if the price was her soul. The 3 days before the ceremony passed in a blur of preparation and mounting tension. Elena watched Adrian coordinate security details with Marcus, reviewing floor plans and guest lists, positioning armed men at strategic points throughout the venue. He was preparing for war disguised as a wedding, and she couldn't tell him why his precautions might not be enough. The warning text haunted her. DeLuca's planning something during the ceremony. But what? And how could she protect Adrian without revealing she'd been contacted by unknown sources, without admitting she'd kept secrets that could have prevented whatever was coming? Thursday night, Elena found herself unable to sleep. She slipped out of bed, leaving Adrian sleeping, and wandered to his office. The security monitors showed the building's perimeter, guards at every entrance, cameras covering every angle. Adrian's fortress was impressive, but fortresses could still fall from the inside. She was studying the monitors when a new text arrived. "You're running out of time. If you don't warn him, blood will be on your hands." Elena's fingers trembled over the keyboard. She could send one message. Tell Adrian everything, throw herself on his mercy and hope he'd forgive the deceptions. But then the penthouse door opened and Marcus entered, flanked by 2 security personnel dragging a man between them. The man's face was bloodied, his expensive suit torn. Even from the office, Elena recognized the cold calculation in Marcus's expression. This was an interrogation in progress. She should have stayed hidden, should have let them handle whatever this was without her involvement. But something drew her out of the office, pulled her toward the confrontation unfolding in the living room. "Mrs. Russo." Marcus looked surprised to see her. "You should go back to bed." "Who is he?" Elena asked, her eyes on the beaten man. "No one important. We caught him trying to access the building's service entrance with falsified credentials." "I'll tell you everything," the man gasped, blood trickling from his split lip. "Just don't let Russo kill me, please." "Elena, go back to the bedroom," Marcus said, his voice harder now. But Elena stood her ground, something clicking in her mind. "He's one of DeLuca's people, isn't he? Here to scout for tomorrow's ceremony." Marcus's expression shifted, surprise mixed with wariness. "How did you know that?" "Because I've been getting warnings about DeLuca planning something. I just didn't know how to tell Adrian without—" She stopped, realizing she'd just confessed to keeping secrets in front of witnesses. "Without what?" Adrian's voice came from the hallway, rough with sleep and sharp with suspicion. He emerged wearing only pajama pants, his chest bare, his hair disheveled. But his eyes were fully alert, dangerous. "What warnings, Elena?" The room went silent. Every person present understood they were witnessing something volatile, a confrontation that could reshape everything. "I got a phone call 3 days ago," Elena said quietly, "and texts. Someone warning me about DeLuca, about threats to both of us." "And you didn't think to mention this?" Adrian's voice was deadly calm, which was somehow worse than anger. "I thought you'd lock me down even tighter. Take away what little freedom I had left." Elena met his eyes, refusing to show fear even as her heart raced. "I was trying to handle it myself." "Handle it yourself." Adrian moved toward her slowly, each step measured. "You're 4 months pregnant with twins, you have no training in security or threat assessment, and you thought you could handle assassination warnings yourself. I thought I could protect you without giving you another excuse to cage me." "Cage you?" Adrian's control snapped, his voice rising. "I'm trying to keep you alive. Do you have any idea what could have happened if Marcus hadn't caught this man? If DeLuca's people had gotten inside?" "I was going to tell you," Elena said, even though she wasn't sure that was true. "I just needed time to..." "Time to what? Get yourself killed? Get our children killed?" Adrian turned to the bleeding man on the floor. "What's DeLuca planning for tomorrow?" The man's eyes darted between them, calculating odds. I don't know the full plan, I swear. I was just supposed to map the exits, report back on security positions. Not good enough. Adrian pulled a gun from Marcus's holster in one smooth motion, pressing it against the man's temple. Try again. Adrian, don't, Elena started. Stay out of this. Adrian's voice was ice. This is what your secrets led to. This is the reality you tried to handle yourself. The man was shaking now, tears mixing with blood. There's a bomb. Somewhere in the venue. Set to go off during the ceremony. That's all I know, I swear. Elena felt the world tilt. A bomb. DeLuca wasn't planning a shooting or a kidnapping. He was planning to eliminate everyone in one catastrophic moment. Where, Adrian demanded. I don't know. I was just supposed to scout, not plant it. Someone else has that job. Please, I'm telling you everything I know. Adrian studied the man for a long moment, then lowered the gun. Marcus, take him to the holding facility. Get everything he knows, names, contacts, operational details. Use whatever methods necessary. Yes, sir. Marcus gestured to his men, who dragged the sobbing captive toward the service elevator. Then Adrian and Elena were alone, the penthouse suddenly too quiet after the violence of the interrogation. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. Sorry. Doesn't cut it. Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless in a way that was more frightening than rage. You lied to me. Kept information that could have gotten both of us killed. After everything we talked about, after I promised transparency and partnership, you still don't trust me. I do trust you. No, you don't. You trust yourself more than you trust me to handle threats without turning into the monster you're afraid I am. Adrian set the gun down on the table with careful precision. You're right. I would have increased security. I would have restricted your movements, because that's what you do when someone you love is being targeted by assassins. See, that's exactly the problem. Your love comes with chains. My love comes with survival. Adrian's composure finally shattered completely. You want freedom? Fine. You're free. Free to leave. Free to take our children and go wherever you want. I'll provide money, security, resources, but I'm done trying to protect someone who fights me at every turn. The words hit like physical blows. Elena had expected anger, recriminations, maybe even violence directed at furniture or walls. But this cold dismissal was worse. This was Adrian giving up. You don't mean that, she said. I've never meant anything more. Adrian turned toward his office. The remarriage is canceled. I'll have Isabella draw up custody agreements and financial arrangements. You can stay here until you find somewhere else, or leave tonight. Your choice. Adrian, wait. No. He stopped but didn't turn around. I'm done waiting, done compromising, done trying to find middle ground with someone who sees every protection as a prison. You want out? You're out. He disappeared into his office, closing the door with quiet finality. Elena stood in the living room, her hands protectively on her stomach, feeling everything she'd feared and fought against crash down around her. She'd gotten exactly what she thought she wanted, freedom from Adrian's control. But it felt nothing like victory. It felt like her world ending. She wanted to follow him, to pound on that door and demand he listen. But pride and fear kept her rooted in place. Maybe he was right. Maybe they were too broken to fix. Maybe love wasn't enough when it came tangled with so much damage. Elena returned to the bedroom and lay in the dark, listening to Adrian moving around in his office. Neither of them slept. She could hear him on the phone, issuing orders in that cold, professional voice he used when emotion had been locked away behind walls of steel. Dawn came gray and cheerless, light filtering through clouds that promised rain. Elena emerged from the bedroom to find Adrian already dressed in a suit, coordinating with Marcus in low tones. The venue's been swept 3 times, Marcus was saying. Bomb dogs, electronic detection, manual inspection. If there's anything there, we'll find it. And the ceremony? Elena asked, her voice rough from unshed tears. Both men looked at her. Marcus's expression was neutral, professional. Adrian's was carefully blank. There is no ceremony, Adrian said. I canceled it 2 hours ago, sent messages to all invited parties citing security concerns. But the succession documents, people questioning my legitimacy, I'll handle it differently. Press release, legal filings, something that doesn't involve putting you in a room with a bomb. Adrian's jaw was tight. Contrary to what you think, I don't actually want you dead. I never thought, didn't you? You thought I'd cage you, control you, suffocate you, but you never thought I'd choose your safety over my own strategic interests. Adrian finally met her eyes, and the pain she saw there made her chest ache. I love you more than I love my empire, Elena, more than power or control or any of this. I just wish you believed that. He left before she could respond, Marcus following, leaving her alone in the penthouse that suddenly felt less like a fortress and more like a tomb. Elena spent the morning pacing, her mind racing through options. She could leave like Adrian suggested, take the resources he'd provide and build a life somewhere far from this dangerous world. Raise their daughters in safety and normalcy. But normalcy was an illusion. DeLuca knew about her. So did Constantine and the Chens and whoever had been sending those warnings. Geography wouldn't protect her from people with resources and motivation. Adrian had been right about that much. She was safer in his fortress than out in the world alone. Besides, leaving meant giving up on them, on the possibility that they could find a way to love each other without destruction. Her phone buzzed. Isabella's name flashed on the screen. "What?" Elena answered. "You should turn on the news." Isabella's voice was tight. Elena found the remote, switching on the television. Every news channel was covering the same story, a massive explosion at the venue that had been scheduled for the ceremony. The building was in flames, emergency responders everywhere, casualties being reported. "Someone triggered the bomb remotely," Isabella said. "Either they found out Adrian canceled and set it off anyway out of spite, or it was on a timer they couldn't disable." Elena's legs gave out. She sank onto the couch, staring at images of destruction. If Adrian hadn't canceled the ceremony, if her secrets hadn't forced that confrontation, if things had gone according to the original plan, "We'd all be dead," she whispered. "Yes, your lies might have actually saved lives." Isabella's tone was grudging. "Adrian's in a meeting with the other families right now. This attack crossed a line. DeLuca just declared war on everyone." "Where is he meeting them?" "I can't tell you that." "Isabella, please. I need to, Need to what? Apologize? Beg forgiveness?" "Elena, you broke his trust. Again. He's done with you." Isabella paused. "But for what it's worth, he's also kept every promise about your security. Your protection detail has been tripled. Financial accounts are active. You have everything you need to leave or stay, whatever you choose. He's taking care of you even while pushing you away." The line went dead. Elena sat in the silent penthouse, watching news coverage of the explosion, her hands on her stomach where her daughters were growing. Adrian was out there somewhere, coordinating a response to an attack that could have killed them all. And she was here, safe behind walls he'd built, benefiting from protection he still provided despite everything. She thought about the card in her coat pocket, the escape route she'd kept secret, the backup plan that had seemed so necessary 3 days ago but now felt like betrayal. She pulled it out, stared at the embossed numbers, then tore it into pieces and flushed them down the toilet. No more secrets, no more escape routes. If she was going to be in this, she had to be all in. Elena grabbed her phone and called Marcus. "Mrs. Russo?" His voice was cautious. "Where's Adrian?" "I can't disclose that information." "Marcus, please. I need to see him, to talk to him. I'll do whatever security protocols are necessary. I'll follow every rule, but I need to see my husband." Her voice broke on the last word. "Please." A long pause, then, "He's at the Atlantic Club in Red Hook. Emergency summit with the 5 families. I'll send a car and escort. Be ready in 10 minutes. "Thank you." Elena changed quickly into something appropriate, a black dress that accommodated her pregnancy, low heels she could actually walk in. She pulled her hair back, minimal makeup, nothing flashy. This wasn't about appearance. This was about proving she could operate in Adrian's world without constant rebellion. The car arrived with 4 security personnel. They drove through Brooklyn in silence, the city gray and tense like it was holding its breath. The Atlantic Club was an unassuming building from the outside, but Elena knew it was one of the neutral meeting places where territorial disputes got resolved before they became wars. Marcus met her at the entrance. "He doesn't know you're here." "Will he be angry?" "Probably, but he'll also be relieved." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "He's been distracted all morning, worried about you despite everything. I need to make this right. Then don't make promises you can't keep. Don't tell him you'll change if you're still going to fight every protection he puts in place. Marcus held the door open. He loves you enough to die for you. The question is whether you love him enough to meet him halfway. The words stung because they were true. Elena had been demanding Adrian change everything while refusing to compromise herself. Partnership required both of them to bend, not just one. Marcus led her through the club, past armed guards, through rooms thick with cigar smoke and tension. They stopped at a set of double doors where voices could be heard arguing in intense, controlled tones. "Wait here," Marcus said. "I'll tell him you're outside." Elena stood in the hallway, her heart pounding, while Marcus entered the room. The voices stopped. Then the door opened and Adrian emerged, his face a mask of controlled emotions. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I know, but I needed to see you, to tell you." Elena took a breath. "You were right about everything. I've been fighting you at every turn, demanding freedom while refusing to acknowledge the real dangers, keeping secrets because I was more afraid of losing independence than losing my life. Or yours. Elena, let me finish, please." She stepped closer. "I'm terrified of being controlled, of losing myself in your world, but I'm more terrified of losing you. And I realized something this morning watching that building burn. I'd rather be in a cage with you than free without you. I'd rather live in your fortress than die alone." Adrian's jaw worked, emotion flickering across his face before he controlled it. "You don't mean that. You'll feel trapped again in a week, a month, and we'll be right back here." "Maybe. Probably." Elena reached for his hand. "But I want to try. Really try this time. Not just existing in the same space, but actually being partners. Learning your world instead of fighting it. Trusting you to protect me without assuming every protection is a prison. And the secrets? The running? No more. I promise. Complete transparency. If I get a threatening phone call, I tell you immediately. If someone approaches me, you're the first to know. No more trying to handle things myself." She squeezed his hand. "I was wrong. About so much. And I'm sorry." Adrian pulled her into his arms suddenly, crushing her against him. She felt him shaking, felt the fear he'd been controlling all morning finally breaking through. "I thought you'd leave," he whispered against her hair. "Thought I'd lost you again." "I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you send me away." "Never." His arms tightened. "I was bluffing this morning, trying to scare you into understanding how serious this is, but I could never actually let you go." Elena pulled back enough to see his face. "Then remarry me. Today. Right now. Not some big political ceremony, just us and a judge and whatever witnesses we need. Make me your wife again before anything else can go wrong." Adrian searched her face. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He turned back to the double doors, opening them to reveal a room full of dangerous men, heads of the major families, their advisors, legal counsel. This was the real power structure of New York's underworld, and they were all staring at Elena with varying degrees of curiosity and calculation. "Gentlemen," Adrian said, his voice carrying absolute authority, "we're taking a brief recess. Judge Chen, I need you for a personal matter." An older man stood, adjusting his glasses. "What kind of personal matter?" "The kind that makes Mrs. Russo's succession rights absolutely undeniable. I need you to perform a marriage ceremony. Now." Judge Chen smiled slightly. "I suppose I can spare a few minutes. Who are the witnesses?" "Everyone in this room," Adrian said. "Let them all see. Let them all testify that Elena Voss Russo is my lawfully wedded wife, chosen partner, and designated heir. Let it be witnessed by every family that matters." A murmur ran through the room. This was brilliant strategy. Forcing all the major players to witness the ceremony meant they couldn't later claim it was invalid or coerced. They became complicit in its legitimacy. "Elena?" Judge Chen turned to her. "You consent to this marriage?" "I do." "And you understand what you're consenting to? Not just marriage to this man, but partnership in his enterprises, both legal and otherwise?" Elena looked at Adrian, then at the assembled power brokers watching her every move. This was it, the moment of no return. Once she said yes in front of these witnesses, she became part of Adrian's world in a way that couldn't be undone. I understand, she said clearly, and I consent freely. The ceremony was brief and businesslike. No flowers, no music, no romance. Just legal words spoken in a room that smelled of cigars and bourbon, witnessed by men who dealt in violence and power. Judge Chen pronounced them married, and Adrian kissed her with a possessiveness that made it clear to everyone watching exactly what she meant to him. Congratulations, Victor Constantine said from the back of the room, his voice dry. Your wife just became the most protected woman in New York. Anyone who touches her now answers to all of us. It was a warning and a promise. The ceremony had done exactly what Adrian intended, made Elena's status so ironclad that threatening her meant threatening the entire power structure. Now, Adrian said, turning back to the assembled families, let's discuss our Marcus DeLuca problem. Elena moved to leave, but Adrian's hand on her wrist stopped her. Stay, he said quietly. You wanted to be involved in security decisions, so be involved. He pulled out a chair for her at the table where the most powerful criminals in the city were gathering. Elena sat, her heart racing, as maps and documents were spread out showing DeLuca's operations, his known associates, his territories. This was Adrian's world, strategic planning that would lead to violence, decisions that would get people killed, and he was inviting her into it, giving her the transparency she'd demanded. DeLuca's made himself a target, Adrian began. The bomb was sloppy, desperate. He's losing control of his operations, reaching for dramatic gestures instead of smart strategy. We can use that. How? One of the family heads asked. We isolate him, cut off his suppliers, put pressure on his subordinates, make it clear that loyalty to DeLuca means war with everyone at this table. Adrian's finger traced routes on the map. He's strongest in the Bronx and parts of Queens. We tighten control around those territories, make them too expensive to hold. And if he doesn't fold, Constantine asked, then we remove him, permanently. Adrian's voice was cold. He tried to kill my wife and children. There's no negotiation after that, only consequences. The discussion continued for 2 hours, detailed planning of a coordinated campaign that would systematically destroy DeLuca's empire. Elena listened, taking it all in, understanding for the first time the scope of Adrian's power. He wasn't just one crime boss. He was the linchpin holding multiple organizations together, the strategist who kept fragile alliances from collapsing into chaos. And now she was his partner in all of it. When the meeting finally concluded, Adrian escorted her out to the waiting car. The rain that had threatened all day was finally falling, turning the city streets slick and dark. You okay? Adrian asked as they drove back toward Manhattan. I just watched you plan someone's execution. Multiple someone's, probably. So, no, I'm not okay, but I'm dealing with it. You can still change your mind, leave. I meant what I said about providing my... I'm not leaving. Elena turned to face him. I'm scared and out of my depth and still not entirely sure this isn't going to destroy me. But I'm staying. Because I love you. Because these babies deserve both their parents. And because running clearly doesn't work. Adrian pulled her close, and they sat in silence as the car navigated through rain-soaked Brooklyn. When they arrived back at the penthouse, he carried her over the threshold, a strange echo of romance in the aftermath of violence and strategy. I'll do better, he said, setting her down gently. I'll give you as much freedom as I can while keeping you safe. I'll explain threats instead of just imposing restrictions. We'll find the balance. And I'll stop fighting every protection like it's an attack on my autonomy. I'll trust that you're not trying to cage me even when it feels limiting. Elena cupped his face. We'll figure it out together. They made love that night, not with the desperate intensity of their early relationship, but with something deeper. A claiming that went both directions, a promise sealed with touch and breath, and the mingling of bodies that had created life together. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets, Elena felt Adrian's hand spread across her stomach. They're getting stronger, he said, feeling the babies move. More active. Dr. Shen says that's normal for this stage. They're running out of room to grow. 3 more months until we meet them. Adrian's voice held wonder and fear. 3 months to make sure the world they're born into is safe enough for them. Is that possible? Making it safe? I don't know. But I'm going to try. He kissed her shoulder. DeLuca made his move. Now we make ours. And we make sure our daughters never have to know the fear you felt this week. Elena closed her eyes, letting exhaustion finally pull her under. Tomorrow would bring new threats, new challenges. DeLuca was still out there, wounded and dangerous. Other rivals would test Adrian's resolve. The Empire required constant defense. But tonight they had this fragile peace, hard-won trust, and love that had survived being tested to breaking. It would have to be enough, because the alternative was unthinkable. The war with Marcus DeLuca unfolded over the next 6 weeks, with the precision of a surgeon's knife and the brutality of a sledgehammer. Elena watched from inside Adrian's fortress as territories shifted, alliances solidified, and DeLuca's empire crumbled piece by piece under coordinated pressure from every major family. She was 7 months pregnant now, her belly enormous with the twins who seemed determined to make their presence known with constant kicks and movements. Doctor. Shun had put her on modified bed rest after her blood pressure spiked during a particularly tense week when 3 of DeLuca's warehouses went up in flames and 2 of his top lieutenants disappeared. You need to stay calm, Dr. Shen had insisted. Stress isn't good for the babies or for you. These last 2 months are critical. But staying calm was impossible when Adrian was orchestrating a war. When he came home each night with new tension in his shoulders, new calculations behind his eyes. When Marcus reported daily on DeLuca's desperate countermoves, increasingly erratic, increasingly violent. He's cornered, Adrian said one evening, standing at the windows overlooking the city. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. Elena sat on the couch, her swollen feet propped up on pillows, one hand rubbing her aching back. How much longer? Days? Maybe a week. Adrian turned to look at her, his expression grim. He's lost too much territory, too many men. He'll either run or make one final desperate play. What kind of play? The kind that tries to hurt me where I'm most vulnerable. His eyes dropped to her stomach. You and the babies. The words sent ice through Elena's veins despite the overheated penthouse. You think he'd come after us directly? I think he's already tried twice. The bomb at the venue was attempt 1. The car that tried to run your security detail off the road last week was attempt 2. Adrian moved to sit beside her, his hand finding hers. I've tripled security. No one gets within 50 feet of you without clearance. But I need you to be vigilant. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, I tell you immediately. I know. Elena squeezed his hand. No more secrets, I promised. Good. Adrian leaned over to press a kiss to her forehead. Because I can't lose you. Not when we're this close to having everything we fought for. That night, Elena dreamed of fire and blood. She woke gasping, her heart racing, to find Adrian already out of bed and on the phone. His voice was low and urgent, the tone he used for crisis management. When? A pause. How many casualties? Another pause. Longer. Secure the site. I'm on my way. He hung up and turned to find Elena watching him. DeLuca? She asked. His main compound in the Bronx just went up. Massive explosion. Looks like he tried to destroy evidence before we could seize it, but the blast was bigger than he anticipated. Adrian was already dressing, moving with efficient speed. Initial reports suggest he was inside when it happened. Elena struggled to sit up, her pregnant belly making every movement awkward. He's dead? We don't know yet. The building collapsed. It'll take hours to search the rubble. Adrian pulled on his jacket, checked his weapon. But if he survived, he's badly hurt. Either way, this is the endgame. Be careful. Always. He kissed her, quick and fierce. Marcus stays here with you. Full security lockdown until I get back. He left, taking most of the security team with him. Elena sat in the too quiet penthouse, one hand on her stomach where the babies were awake and active, tumbling over each other in the confined space of her womb. They were running out of room. Dr. Shen had said they'd be born early, probably within the next few weeks. Twin pregnancies rarely went to full term. The thought of bringing her daughters into a world still consumed by violence made Elena's chest tight with anxiety. She wanted this finished, wanted DeLuca dead or disappeared, wanted the threat eliminated before her children took their first breaths. Hours crawled by. Elena tried to sleep but couldn't, tried to eat but had no appetite. She paced the penthouse, as much as her ungainly body allowed, while Marcus monitored security feeds and communication channels. "Any word?" she asked for the dozenth time. "They're still excavating. The building was 4 stories, a lot of rubble to move." Marcus didn't look up from his monitors. "Adrian's on site. He'll call when there's news." Elena returned to pacing. The babies were restless tonight, more active than usual. One of them, Doctor. Shen thought it was baby A, positioned lower, kept kicking her ribs with surprising force. Elena pressed against the spot, trying to shift her daughter into a more comfortable position. Then pain lanced through her abdomen, sharp and sudden. She gasped, doubling over, one hand gripping the back of the couch for support. "Mrs. Russo?" Marcus was at her side immediately. "What's wrong?" "I don't—" Another pain, stronger this time, radiating from her belly through her entire core. "Something's not right." Marcus pulled out his phone, already dialing. "Dr. Shen, we need you at the penthouse immediately. Mrs. Russo is experiencing pain." A pause. "No, she's 7 months. Twins." "Yes, I understand. How soon can you get here?" He hung up and guided Elena to the couch. "Dr. Shen is 20 minutes away. She said to time the contractions if they continue." "Contractions?" Elena felt panic rising. "It's too early. They can't come now. I'm only 30 weeks. Twins often come early. You knew that." Marcus's voice was calm, professional, but she could see the worry in his eyes. "Let's just wait for Dr. Shen to assess." Another contraction hit, and this time Elena couldn't suppress a cry of pain. It felt like her entire abdomen was seizing, muscles contracting with a force that took her breath away. "Call Adrian," she gasped when the pain subsided. "I need him here." Marcus hesitated. "He's in the middle of—" "I don't care. Call him, please." Marcus stepped away, speaking urgently into his phone. Elena heard fragments. "Labor. Early. Needs you here," before he returned. "He's on his way. 15 minutes. The contractions continued, coming closer together. By the time Dr. Shen arrived, Elena was in significant pain, her water having broken in a sudden gush that soaked through her clothes and the couch cushions. "This is active labor, doctor," Shen confirmed after a quick examination. "The babies are coming tonight. We need to get you to the hospital immediately." "No hospital." Adrian's voice came from the doorway. He looked like he'd run the entire way from the Bronx, disheveled, breathing hard, still wearing clothes covered in dust from the collapsed building. "Too exposed. Too many variables I can't control." "Adrian, she needs proper medical facilities," Dr. Shen started. "Then bring the facilities here. You told me weeks ago we might need to do a home delivery if security situations made hospital visits too risky. Well, here we are." Adrian moved to Elena's side, taking her hand. "Everything you need. Get it here. Now." Dr. Shen looked between them, clearly calculating the risks. "If there are complications, if we need emergency surgery, there's a surgical suite 2 floors down, fully equipped. I'll have it prepped immediately." Adrian's voice left no room for argument. "My daughters aren't being born in a public hospital where DeLuca's remaining men could try something. They're being born here, where I can protect them." Another contraction hit, and Elena cried out, gripping Adrian's hand hard enough to hurt. When the pain subsided, she was breathing hard, tears streaming down her face. "Whatever's safest for the babies," she managed. "I trust you both to figure it out." Dr. Shen made her decision. "Fine, but I need my full medical team here within the hour. Nurses, an anesthesiologist, neonatal specialists for the twins. And if anything goes wrong, we transport to the hospital regardless of security concerns. Agreed?" "Agreed." Adrian was already on his phone, issuing rapid-fire orders. "Marcus, prep the surgical suite. Get Dr. Shen's team here, and find out if there's any word from the Bronx site." "DeLuca's body was recovered 20 minutes ago," Marcus reported. "Confirmed dead. The war's over." Elena felt relief wash through her even as another contraction built. DeLuca was dead. The immediate threat eliminated. Her daughters would be born into a world slightly less dangerous than it had been an hour ago. The next hours blurred together in a haze of pain and medical activity. Dr. Shen's team arrived with remarkable speed, transforming a guest suite into a fully functional delivery room. Elena labored through contractions that grew increasingly intense, Adrian never leaving her side except when Dr. Shen insisted he scrub up properly. "The first baby is breech," Dr. Shen announced after another examination. We need to do a C-section. The second baby's position is also suboptimal. Attempting vaginal delivery could put them both at risk. Then we do the surgery, Elena said immediately. Fear coursed through her. Fear of surgery, of complications, of all the things that could go wrong. But greater than that fear was the need to protect her daughters. Whatever's safest for them. They moved her to the surgical suite Adrian had built into the building, a fully equipped operating room that spoke to his paranoia and resources in equal measure. As the anesthesiologist prepared the epidural, Elena gripped Adrian's hand. "If something goes wrong," she started. "Nothing's going wrong." Adrian's voice was fierce. "You're going to be fine. The babies are going to be fine. We're all walking out of this together." "But if—" "Elena." He leaned close, his forehead touching hers. "We've survived everything else. We'll survive this too." The epidural took effect, numbness spreading through her lower body. They positioned a surgical drape so she couldn't see the procedure, but she felt pressure and tugging as Dr. Shen worked. Adrian stayed by her head, holding her hand, his face pale but determined. "First baby is out," Dr. Shen announced. A cry filled the room, thin and outraged, the sound of a new life demanding to be acknowledged. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as a nurse placed a tiny, wrinkled infant on her chest. "Baby A," the nurse said. 4 pounds, 2 ounces, small but strong. Elena stared at her daughter, impossibly tiny, covered in vernix and blood, her face scrunched up in fury at being evicted from her warm womb home. She had Adrian's dark hair and Elena's nose, and she was the most perfect thing Elena had ever seen. "She's beautiful," Adrian whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Second baby," Dr. Shen called. "Coming out now." Another cry joined the first, equally indignant. Another nurse brought this baby over, slightly larger, her cries louder. Baby B, 4 pounds, 6 ounces, also strong and healthy. They placed the second twin on Elena's chest beside her sister. The babies immediately found each other, their tiny hands touching, and Elena felt something crack open in her chest, a love so fierce and consuming it was almost painful. "Our daughters," she said, looking up at Adrian. His face was wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. "Our family." The medical team worked efficiently, completing the surgery and moving Elena to recovery. The babies were examined, measured, given clean bills of health despite being 5 weeks premature. Dr. Shen seemed satisfied. "They're small but healthy. Strong lungs, good color, reflexes normal. They'll need monitoring for the next few days, but I think they're going to be just fine." Over the next hours, as Elena recovered from surgery and learned to nurse 2 demanding infants, the reality of parenthood crashed over them both. The babies needed to eat constantly. They cried in stereo. They seemed determined to sleep only when held, which meant Elena and Adrian took turns walking the room with 1 infant each, swaying and shushing and trying to convince them that the world outside the womb was safe. I don't know how people do this with less help," Elena said at 4 a.m., nursing one baby while Adrian burped the other. "People with less help don't have trained security personnel willing to take shifts rocking babies," Adrian said, looking exhausted but somehow transformed. "Marcus already volunteered for morning duty so we can sleep." "Marcus? Head of security, Marcus. Wants to babysit? Apparently he has nieces. Claims he's good with babies." Adrian looked down at the infant in his arms, baby B, who they'd tentatively started calling Sophia. "Though I might not let him, I kind of don't want to put her down." Elena understood completely. Despite the exhaustion, despite the pain from her incision, despite the overwhelming nature of suddenly being responsible for 2 tiny humans, she couldn't stop staring at them, couldn't stop touching their impossibly small fingers, their soft heads, their perfect little faces. "We need to name them officially," she said. "We can't keep calling them Baby A and Baby B. Sophia for this one." Adrian looked at the infant he was holding. "After my mother, if that's okay with you." "Sophia is perfect, and this one," Elena looked at the baby nursing, her tiny hand curled against Elena's breast. "Isabella, not after your lawyer," she added quickly. "After my grandmother. The one who told me to never settle for a love that made me smaller." Adrian smiled slightly. "Think she'd approve of me?" "Probably not. But she'd approve of this." Elena gestured at the 3 of them, him holding Sophia, her nursing Isabella, both of them disheveled and exhausted and completely in love. She always said the right love makes you braver, strong enough to fight for what matters. Is that what we're doing? Fighting for what matters? Every day. Elena reached out with her free hand and Adrian took it. We're not perfect. We're probably going to screw up in 100 different ways. But we're trying. That has to count for something. 3 days later, when Elena had recovered enough to move around and the babies had been declared healthy enough to thrive outside the intensive monitoring, Adrian called a meeting in the penthouse. The heads of the major families arrived. Constantine, the Chen family representatives, others whose names Elena was still learning. They gathered in the living room where, less than a week ago, violence and interrogation had unfolded. Now 2 bassinets held sleeping infants, and the assembled crime bosses looked distinctly uncomfortable around the tiny humans. "Gentlemen," Adrian began, standing with Sophia in his arms while Elena held Isabella. "I wanted you to meet my daughters, Sophia and Isabella Russo, the future of everything we've built." "They're beautiful," Constantine said, his rough voice surprisingly gentle. "Congratulations." "Thank you, and thank you all for your support during the DeLuca situation, which brings me to why I asked you here." Adrian's voice shifted, became more formal. "I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations." The room went silent. Every man present stared at Adrian like he'd announced he was joining a monastery. "Stepping back?" one of the Chen representatives finally said. "What does that mean?" "It means Marcus Vega will handle most operational decisions. I'll remain involved in strategic planning and major negotiations, but the daily management passes to him." Adrian looked down at Sophia. "My daughters are going to know their father, not as some distant figure who's always working, always distracted. They're going to have my time, my attention, my presence." "And if that makes you look weak?" Constantine asked bluntly. "Then people will test that weakness, and they'll learn it's an illusion." Adrian's voice hardened. "I'm not becoming soft. I'm becoming smart. A man who doesn't know his children, who sacrifices everything for power, has nothing worth protecting. I'm building something to pass on to them. That requires being present." Elena felt tears stinging her eyes. This was more than she'd dared to hope for. Adrian choosing family over empire, presence over power. It wasn't abandonment of his responsibilities, but a rebalancing that acknowledged what truly mattered. The families left with promises of continued cooperation and thinly veiled warnings that they'd be watching to see if Adrian's new priorities made him vulnerable. Elena didn't care. Let them watch. Let them test. Adrian had proven repeatedly that he could protect what was his. That night, with both babies finally asleep in their bassinets, Elena and Adrian collapsed into bed together. Her incision still ached, and exhaustion pulled at every muscle. But she'd never felt more content. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For choosing us. For stepping back. For proving that love doesn't always have to come with chains." She turned to face him in the darkness. "I know it wasn't easy, giving up that control. It was the easiest decision I've ever made." Adrian pulled her close, careful of her healing incision. "I spent years building power because I thought it would make me untouchable. But power doesn't keep you warm at night, doesn't give you purpose. Doesn't make you want to be better than you are. And we do? You do. The girls do. This?" He gestured at the room, the sleeping babies, the life they were building. "This is what I've been looking for without knowing it. Not an empire. A family." Over the following weeks, they settled into a new rhythm. Marcus took over most of Adrian's operational duties with competent efficiency. Adrian spent his days learning to change diapers, walking the floor at 2 a.m. with a screaming infant, researching baby development with the same intensity he'd once applied to territorial strategies. Elena healed slowly, her body recovering from pregnancy and surgery while adapting to the demands of nursing twins. They hired a night nurse to help with feedings so they could sleep in shifts. They baby-proofed the penthouse even though the girls were months away from mobility. They argued about everything from sleep schedules to whether Sophia's cry sounded different from Isabella's. It was exhausting and overwhelming and nothing like the life Elena had imagined when she'd first run 6 months ago. But it was real. It was theirs. And it was built on a foundation of choice rather than coercion. 2 months after the twins were born, Elena woke in the middle of the night to find Adrian's side of the bed empty. She checked the nursery, both babies sleeping peacefully, monitored by the night nurse. Then she found him in his office, staring at documents spread across his desk. "What are you doing up?" she asked. Adrian looked up, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression. "Making arrangements. For the future." "What kind of arrangements?" "I'm liquidating the illegal operations, transitioning everything to legitimate businesses over the next 2 years." He gestured at the papers. "Real estate development, import/export, nightclubs and restaurants. All the infrastructure is already in place. I'm just removing the criminal elements." Elena sat down slowly, processing this. "You're going legitimate?" "For them." Adrian's eyes moved toward the nursery where their daughters slept. "I don't want them growing up the way I did, always looking over their shoulders, never knowing who to trust. I want them to inherit businesses they can be proud of, empires that don't require body counts." "That's a massive undertaking, risky too." "Everything worth doing is risky. But I'm tired of building things through violence, tired of making enemies faster than allies, tired of worrying that every decision might get someone I love killed." Adrian reached for her hand. "I want to be a man my daughters can respect. That requires becoming someone different than who I've been." "You're already someone they can respect. Someone I respect." Elena squeezed his hand. "But I love that you want to be better. For them. For us. It won't happen overnight. There are obligations, commitments, deals that can't be unwound quickly. But in 2 years, maybe 3, we'll be clean, legitimate, just another wealthy family with complicated pasts that don't define our futures." Elena stood and moved around the desk to sit in Adrian's lap, careful and slow. Her body was still healing, still adjusting, but she needed the contact, needed to feel the solidity of him, the warmth of his embrace. "I love you," she said. "Not despite who you are, but because you're willing to change, willing to grow, willing to choose love over power." "I love you too, more than I thought possible to love another person." Adrian's arms tightened around her. "You saved me, Elena, twice. Once by leaving and forcing me to see what I'd become, and once by coming back and giving me a reason to be better." They sat together in the quiet office while the city glittered beyond the windows. Millions of lives intersecting, millions of stories unfolding. Somewhere out there, threats still existed. Rivals who might test Adrian's new priorities. Enemies who might see his transition to legitimacy as weakness. But for now, they had this. A fortress that had become a home. An empire slowly transforming into something sustainable. 2 perfect daughters sleeping peacefully, unaware that their very existence had reshaped their father's world. And they had each other, 2 people who'd learned the hard way that love without trust was a prison, but love with partnership could be freedom. It wasn't the ending Elena had imagined when she'd fled that rainy night 6 months ago. It was better. Messier, more complicated, built on compromises and hard-won understanding. But it was real, it was theirs, and it was worth every battle they'd fought to claim it. 6 months later, on a sunny afternoon that painted Manhattan in gold, Elena stood in the penthouse watching Adrian on the floor with their daughters. Sophia and Isabella were 8 months old now, crawling everywhere, getting into everything, demanding constant attention and supervision. Adrian was building a tower of blocks while both babies attacked it from different sides, giggling when it fell. "Destructive tendencies," he said, rebuilding the tower. "Definitely inherited from their mother," says the man who literally demolished his cousin's empire. Elena smiled, her camera capturing the moment. "I'm preserving this for their teenage years when they claim you were never fun." "I'm extremely fun. I'm the most fun." Adrian scooped up Isabella, who shrieked with delight. "Tell her, Principessa. Tell Mama how fun I am." Isabella grabbed his nose, and Sophia crawled over to demand her own attention. Elena watched Adrian juggle both babies with practiced ease. This man who'd once terrified her with his control, now completely controlled by 2 tiny humans who had him wrapped around their fingers. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Shen. "Follow-up appointment next week. And we should discuss birth control options, unless you're planning on more babies soon." Elena laughed. More babies. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and appealing. But not yet. They were still learning to navigate this new life, still finding balance between Adrian's business demands and family time, still discovering who they could be together when fear and desperation weren't driving every decision. "What's funny?" Adrian asked. "Dr. Shen wants to discuss birth control." "Probably wise. As much as I love these two, I'm not ready to be outnumbered again this soon." He settled both babies in his lap. "Though in a few years, maybe, when we've got this parenting thing figured out." "You think we'll ever have it figured out?" "Probably not, but we'll get better at improvising." Adrian looked up at her, and the love in his eyes was uncomplicated, pure. "We're good at that. Improvising. Making things work even when they shouldn't." Elena crossed the room to sit beside them on the floor, Isabella immediately crawling into her lap while Sophia stayed with Adrian. They sat together as afternoon light painted the penthouse in warm colors, their daughters babbling nonsense syllables that might someday be words, the city humming with life beyond their windows. This was happiness, not the absence of problems or the presence of perfection, but the choice, renewed every day, to build something together, to love despite fear, to trust despite damage, to believe that people could change, that futures could be rewritten, that family could be chosen and fought for and cherished. Elena had run from Adrian's world once, terrified of losing herself in his control. She'd come back pregnant and desperate, trading freedom for safety. But somewhere in the chaos of those months, through threats and violence, through difficult truths and harder compromises, they'd found something neither had been looking for: partnership, equality, love that made them both braver. And in the end, that was worth every sacrifice, every hard conversation, every moment of fear and doubt, because this, their daughters, their imperfect family, their hard-won peace, this was everything that mattered. Adrian caught her eye and smiled, and in that moment, Elena knew with absolute certainty that she'd finally found her way home. Not to a place, but to a person. Not to safety, but to something rarer and more precious. To love that set her free.